Daniel's birthday dinner should have been warm and pleasant, but the moment the clinking of silverware stopped, his voice cut through the room, cold as steel. "Mom, it's time you found a place of your own." Silence fell. The light glinted off Crystal's face, her polished features frozen in a porcelain-like smile. Evelyn Moore sat still, her fingers tightening around the edge of her napkin. "What did you just say?" her voice rasped. Daniel avoided her eyes. "This house is getting crowded. The kids are growing up. You should look for somewhere else. I'll help with the first month's rent." Crystal smiled, her tone gentle but sharp. "It's not that we don't love you, Mother, but you have your old ways. The children need structure." Evelyn's throat tightened. She had only been there a few months after selling her old house, hoping to rest before finding a new job. "I just wanted to be near my family," she said quietly. Crystal set down her wine glass. "You confuse them, Mother. Hannah doesn't know who to listen to and Liam talks back. They need space to grow." Daniel nodded. "You've done enough. You should think about what's best for everyone." Evelyn rose slowly. The chair scraped against the wooden floor, the sound sharp and final. She looked around the dining room, once filled with laughter, now cold and hollow. "I understand," she said softly. "Thank you for dinner." An hour later, she packed her belongings in silence. 2 suitcases, 1 handbag. Daniel knocked on the door, hesitating. "Mom, where will you go?" Evelyn looked at him, her tone calm but firm. "That's not your concern. Some doors once closed should never be opened again." Crystal appeared beside him, arms folded. "Mother, please don't make this dramatic. We just need some distance." Evelyn's voice was steady. "Distance isn't measured in square feet, my dear. It's measured in gratitude." The door shut with a dull click. The night wind swept through, carrying the scent of rain and damp earth. She pulled her suitcases down the steps, her heart heavier than her luggage. A taxi stopped by the gate. The driver glanced in the mirror, seeing the quiet woman staring out the window. "Motel 12 on Highway 5, she murmured. The city lights flickered across her face, revealing the fine lines, the exhaustion, and eyes too dry for tears. She thought of her years working at the hospital, the long shifts, the small paychecks that raised Daniel into the man he had become. She had once believed a mother's love was unbreakable. Now it lay shattered like an old mirror. The motel appeared through the rain, its neon sign flickering weakly. She paid with her last $100 bill and received the key to room 12B. The air smelled of mildew and smoke. The bed was narrow, the sheets wrinkled the walls, stained with damp spots. Yet at least here, no one could tell her to leave. Evelyn opened her suitcase and took out an old photo frame, Daniel at 10 years old, hugging her after winning his first soccer game. That smile lived only in glass now. She placed it on the small table and looked around. A dim yellow bulb peeling paint, the sound of steady rain outside this poor little room, somehow felt like a beginning. She didn't know what kind, but it wasn't failure. Sitting on the edge of the bed, she opened a small notebook. The first line trembled as she wrote, "Day 1. I've lost my home, lost my son, but I haven't lost myself." She paused, studying her rough, calloused hands, the same hands that once mended clothes, cooked meals, wiped tears from a boy's face. Now they would have to build again. A gust of wind rattled the window. Evelyn closed the notebook and turned off the light. In the dark, her eyes stayed open, holding a faint spark, the light of someone who had fallen yet never surrendered. The next morning, sunlight slipped through the curtain and onto the half-open suitcase. Inside, among her worn clothes, lay a small canvas bag filled with old carpentry tools, a hammer sandpaper, and a tin of paint, the only inheritance her late husband had left. Evelyn ran her fingers over the hammer's handle, a faint smile touching her lips as she remembered his words. "Nothing is truly broken if you know how to look at it." She rose, opened the window, and breathed in the scent of damp wood drifting from afar. In that quiet moment, she knew with absolute certainty her life wasn't ending here. From this shabby room 12B, Evelyn Moore would begin again. And one day, the very people who turned her away would stand at her doorstep, knocking, begging to come in. Last night they thought they had rid themselves of a burden. What they didn't know was that they had awakened a strength long asleep. Evelyn smiled faintly. Perhaps there was nothing more precious than starting over with the very hands the world once dismissed as useless. The morning was gray with light rain still pattering on the tin roof of Motel 12. Evelyn Moore sat by the bed staring at a cup of cold coffee. Out on the 5-lane highway, cars roared past, and no one knew that a 68-year-old woman who had just lost everything was starting over with $900 in her purse. She folded the room bill, $43 a night, and sighed softly. If she didn't find work soon, that money would vanish in less than 2 weeks. Evelyn put on her coat and stepped into the lobby where the smell of burnt coffee mixed with floor cleaner. Behind the counter, the Indian owner, Mrs. Patel, looked up and smiled kindly. "Can't sleep." Evelyn nodded lightly. "I'm just getting used to life again." The owner poured more coffee and placed it on the table. "People only come here when they have nowhere else to go, but sometimes the worst places are the best beginnings." Evelyn held the cup, feeling warmth spread through her fingertips. Maybe it was true, no one really hit rock bottom until they decided to stand up again. She went back to her room and opened a small notebook, writing the first line, Day 2. "I don't know where I'm going yet, but I won't let today go to waste." The handwriting was shaky but determined. She remembered her years as an administrative nurse, managing records and calculating every medication bill. That was probably the only skill she had left. Evelyn walked to the public library. The street was wet, lined with closed storefronts from bankrupt businesses. As she walked, memories of the night her son threw her out came flooding back. The words, "You're a burden," still cut through her like a blade that could never be pulled out. She whispered to herself, "If they see me as a burden, I'll turn that burden into strength." The library was bright and quiet, filled with the comforting scent of old paper. Evelyn sat at a computer searching for jobs for older adults. Most listings were low-paying cleaning, babysitting, answering phones. She was about to give up when she stopped at a small line of text part-time accountant, needed East Austin Furniture Store. $15 an hour. Not much, but it was a start. She jotted down the address and took the bus across town. The little wood shop stood by the road, its faded sign reading Kim & Son Furniture Restoration. A middle-aged Asian man was wiping down a table. "I'm Harold Kim," he said when she introduced herself. Evelyn briefly explained her bookkeeping experience, her voice calm but steady. Harold studied her carefully. No degree needed, just honesty. It's all by hand, no computers. "Can you handle that?" Evelyn smiled. "I grew up before computers. I write faster than I type." He chuckled. "Good. I'll pay $15 an hour 3 days a week. If that's fine with you, start tomorrow." Evelyn thanked him, her voice trembling slightly. When she stepped outside, standing under the sunlight, her heart lifted a quiet joy. Simple, yet enough to make her breathe again. That evening, Evelyn returned to the motel and hung her only decent outfit by the window. The rain had stopped. Neon lights from the street reflected her thin figure against the glass. She sat down and opened an old picture frame of Daniel at 10 years old, his bright smile holding a baseball trophy. That little boy had long forgotten who bought him his first glove. She whispered softly, "You called me a burden. I'll show you even a burden can stand on its own." Then she put the photo away, poured a glass of water, and sat in silence, listening to the distant hum of the highway, fading like the rhythm of time. At dawn, Evelyn woke before sunrise. She looked at herself in the mirror, dark circles under her eyes, messy hair, but no despair in her gaze. She slipped on her old sweater, tucked the address note into her pocket, and stepped outside. When the door closed behind her, the faint click sounded like the ending of her past. The air outside was crisp and cold. Evelyn lifted her head to the pale sky and whispered, "A new day, a new life." She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but at least it was hers to walk. And somewhere among the old wooden boards of Harold's workshop, a chance for her rebirth was waiting just like her own life. The next morning, Evelyn Moore walked into Kim & Son Furniture Restoration, right at 8 o'clock. The air inside was thick with the scent of varnished sawdust and pine resin, the fragrance of work and memory. Harold Kim, the owner, was stacking planks of wood onto the shelf. "You're early," he said cheerfully. "I like people who are on time." Evelyn smiled softly. "When you have nothing left to lose, time is all you have." He handed her an old ledger, its pages yellowed with age. Record orders, paint costs, delivery fees, and customer invoices. Everything here is done by hand, no software at all. Evelyn opened the notebook, squinting at the messy handwriting of whoever had written before. "I understand," she said. "I used to do bookkeeping in a hospital. Only difference is this place smells like wood instead of disinfectant." The morning passed slowly. Evelyn sat at a wooden desk in the corner of the workshop, writing while listening to the rhythm of planer saws and hammers echoing through the room. Occasionally, Harold paused to show her how to identify different types of wood. "This is white oak, durable, but absorbs moisture. And this one mahogany, people throw it away thinking it's ugly, but once it's polished, it's more beautiful than anything else." Evelyn listened closely, her eyes bright. She ran her fingers along the wooden surface, feeling the grain like the scars of life, rough but real. At noon, Harold invited her to have lunch in a small room behind the shop. He brought out 2 lunch boxes and a bottle of lemonade. "Do you have family here?" he asked. Evelyn smiled gently, her voice calm. "Yes, but they're busy living their lives. I'm learning how to live the rest of mine." Harold nodded, asking nothing more. The carpenter understood better than anyone the value of silence when a person was trying to mend their heart. In the afternoon, while Harold was out delivering furniture, Evelyn walked along the shelves to check the inventory. In a dark corner, she found a pile of broken chairs, scratched tables, and planks left to rot. She asked a young worker nearby, "What are these for?" "Trash, ma'am," he replied. "Boss said they're no good anymore." Evelyn bent down, brushing her hand over a scarred tabletop. Beneath the dust, the wood still shone with a warm brown hue. "Not ruined, just waiting for someone to care again," she murmured. That night, back at the motel, the image of the old wood wouldn't leave her mind. She thought of her late husband, a carpenter who once taught her how to sand paint and be patient with every fiber of wood. She could almost hear his voice in her memory saying, "Nothing is truly broken if you know how to look with patient eyes." Those words stayed with her all night. The next morning, Evelyn asked Harold if she could take a few discarded pieces. He raised an eyebrow. "What for? That's just junk." She replied, "They just need to be touched again." He laughed and agreed. She brought them back to the motel, spread newspaper on the floor, and began to clean. Every stroke of sandpaper, every layer of oil paint seemed to smooth out the scars inside her heart. 3 days later, the first table was finished. The mahogany surface gleamed under the morning sun, reflecting her image, tired but radiant. Evelyn placed it in the corner of her room, took a photo with her old phone, and posted it on a second-hand site, hand-restored wooden table for those who believe beauty can return. 4 hours later, a message arrived. A middle-aged woman came to see it in person. She ran her fingers across the surface, eyes wide in surprise. "It's beautiful. How did you keep the wood grain like this?" Evelyn smiled. I just wiped the dust so it could breathe again. The deal was quick, $280 in cash. As the customer left, Evelyn looked at the money in her hand, feeling something both strange and familiar. It wasn't just money, it was proof that she still had worth. She slipped it into her wallet and whispered, "Day 5, I earned the first dollar of my new life." That evening, she stopped by the shop and showed Harold a photo of the table. His eyes widened. "You made this? It's better than what I sell." Evelyn smiled warmly. "It's just old wood, but it reminded me of who I used to be." Harold nodded his gaze full of respect. "If you want, I've got a whole storage full of pieces like that." Evelyn looked around the workshop, seeing countless discarded things. To her eyes, they were no longer junk. They were opportunities. When she returned to the motel that night, it was late. She sat by the window and wrote in her notebook, "Everything abandoned is just waiting for someone to see its worth. Tomorrow, I'll start again with wood, with my hands with faith." Outside, the highway hummed like a steady heartbeat. Evelyn closed her eyes, feeling the faint scent of paint on her fingertips. For the first time in years, she felt truly alive. On Monday morning, Evelyn arrived at the shop earlier than usual. The first light of day streamed through the dusty windows, shining across the pile of broken tables and chairs she had been keeping an eye on. Harold Kim walked in and saw her crouch down, holding an old wooden plank. "You're collecting those again," he teased. Evelyn looked up, sawdust clinging to her hair, her eyes bright. "I want to see what I can make from them. If it works, you can sell it and we'll split the profit." Harold laughed. "If you can turn that pile of junk into money, I'm all for it." For the first time in years, Evelyn felt she had a real purpose. She threw herself into the work with a strange passion, sanding, painting, gluing, and polishing. The scent of varnish mixed with the sound of planing wood filling the small workshop with warmth. The younger workers watched her curiously. One of them said Mrs. Evelyn's the kind who doesn't know how to rest. She smiled. "I've been resting for 20 years. Now it's time to start again." A week later, the first chair was finished. The white oak, once broken, now stood firm and gleaming like new. Harold stared in amazement. "How did you fix the joint so perfectly?" Evelyn replied. "Same as people, broken things just need the right kind of support." He placed the chair in the storefront with a small sign that read, "Special Restored Piece." 2 days later, it sold for twice the price of a new one. Harold patted her shoulder. "You've got a golden eye. Others see trash, you see money." Evelyn smiled softly. "I just see opportunity proof that nothing is truly useless, not even me." News of the lady who restores wood spread quickly through the neighborhood. Another furniture shop invited Evelyn to look at their old stock. Harold seemed uneasy. "Are you planning to leave?" Evelyn shook her head. "No, I want to help more pieces come back to life. If you're afraid of losing me, then let's make this bigger." Harold was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "All right, we're partners." That afternoon, they drove to an old warehouse on the outskirts of town. Hundreds of planks, chairs, and tables lay stacked and forgotten, covered in thick dust. Evelyn placed her hand on one of the boards and felt its faint warmth. "All my life, I was treated like a burden," she said softly. "Now I'm going to turn what's been thrown away into something valuable." Harold looked at her with deep respect. From that day on, the workshop was divided into 2 sections, one for new furniture and one called Revive the Restoration Area under Evelyn's care. She hired 2 older workers who had been unemployed, teaching them how to handle damp wood mix paint and smooth every grain to perfection. They called her Sister Evelyn because of her agility and precision. The once quiet workshop became lively, filled with laughter mixed with the sound of saws and hammers. 3 months later, Revive started turning a profit. Orders kept coming and some customers even asking for custom restorations. Harold checked the books, thrilled. Revenue's up 40%. Without you, this place would have shut down. Evelyn replied gently, "You gave me a chance. I'm just returning it through work." One afternoon, while she was polishing a table, a voice called from the door. A young woman in a blazer stepped inside. "Are you Mrs. Moore? I'm from Green Haven Company. We heard you're excellent at restoring furniture. My boss would like to place an order." Evelyn paused for a moment, then invited her in. 3 days later, the contract was signed. Green Haven ordered 10 vintage table sets to be restored in a modern style. Harold worried. "That's a big order. Can we finish in time?" Evelyn smiled. "It doesn't need to be fast, it just needs to be real." She organized the team, guiding each worker like a conductor leading an orchestra of wood. When Green Haven received their order, the company director was astonished. "I can't believe discarded pieces could come back to life like this. Have you ever thought about opening your own workshop?" Evelyn said nothing, but inside the seed had been planted. That evening she returned to the motel late. The neon lights outside reflected on her face, still covered in sweat and sawdust, but her eyes shone with quiet joy. She sat down and opened her notebook. Day 90. "I earned more than I did in my first month, but the real reward is knowing I can begin again." She closed the book and looked out the window. The rain fell in soft silver lines. "They once threw me out like something old," she whispered. "Now the things once thrown away are keeping me alive. True worth isn't given, it's made." In the distance, thunder rumbled. Evelyn stretched her calloused hands, inhaling the lingering scent of varnish on her skin. In the stillness of the night, she realized that everything forgotten can be reborn, and those once seen as burdens can rise again too. 4 months later, the Revive workshop under Evelyn Moore's care had become the heart and soul of the store. Harold no longer called her Miss, but partner. They worked in perfect rhythm. He handled the clients. She handled the products. The scent of varnish and pine resin filled the air, giving the place a constant warmth. On the wall, Evelyn had hung a small hand-painted sign that read, "Nothing is abandoned if faith remains." Every morning she arrived early, her calloused hands gliding over cracked pieces of wood, feeling the warmth within each grain. Harold brought her coffee. "Think these will bring in any money?" he asked. Evelyn smiled. "If I'm right, these will pay the rent this month." Harold chuckled. "You talk like wood has magic." "It does," she said, "as long as the person touching it believes." Just as everything was going well, her old phone vibrated. A short message appeared. "Mom, it's Daniel. I heard you're working in Austin. I want to visit." Evelyn stared at the screen, a coldness passing through her chest. 6 months since the day he threw her out, and now he wanted to visit. She deleted the message, set the phone down, and turned back to the half-finished table. "It's all right," she whispered. "I'm doing just fine, even if you don't know it." That night, she ate instant noodles in her motel room, the yellow light casting soft shadows on her sun-browned face. She opened her notebook, day 120. "I still work, but perhaps even pain gets tired." She closed it, looked at her son's photograph, and whispered, "Someday you'll see I'm no longer the one left behind." The next morning, a group of art students arrived at the workshop to learn about wood restoration. Harold teased, "They came for you, Evelyn." She smiled, her eyes glowing with quiet pride. She showed them step by step. "Look at this plank," she said. "It looks useless, but touch it and you'll feel it's still strong. People are the same, never judge by their roughest surface." The room fell silent, then erupted in applause. Harold watched from the side, nodding with quiet respect. That afternoon, Green Haven sent word of a new order, 20 sets of tables and chairs. Harold grew anxious. "That's a big order. We'll need more people." Evelyn thought for a moment. Hire those no one wants: the elderly, the unemployed, the ones who've been cast aside. They understand the value of being given another chance. A week later, the workshop buzzed with laughter. The people who had once been jobless now worked diligently beside Evelyn. She taught them the craft, cooked lunch for them, and shared her faith in every word. She paid them more than the usual rate. Harold questioned it. "Why pay them so much?" Evelyn smiled. "Because I know what it feels like to be seen as cheap. No one deserves to be undervalued." News of the Revive model spread. A local newspaper came to interview her. The reporter asked, "Do you think you're successful now?" Evelyn smiled gently. "I'm just living. But if living means helping someone believe in themselves, then maybe I am." The article was published under the headline, "The Woman Who Restores the Forgotten Furniture and People Alike." 3 days later, orders flooded in. Harold was thrilled. "We might need to rent another warehouse." Evelyn smiled softly. "That's good. But remember, we work for people, not for money." That evening, when she returned to the motel, she saw a white envelope on her doorstep. No sender's name. Inside was a check for $200 and a handwritten note, "For you, Mom. I know you're doing well. I'm sorry." The familiar handwriting made her hands tremble. She sat on the edge of the bed staring at the check for a long time before folding it. She didn't cry, only whispered, "You remembered. That's enough." The next morning, she took the check to the bank and asked them to transfer the full amount to a fund supporting unemployed workers. When Harold asked about it, she simply said, "A gift has found its way back to where it belongs." That afternoon, the golden light of sunset poured through the workshop window. Evelyn opened her notebook, day 180. "I've realized forgiveness is also a form of restoration." She closed the book and looked around the shop. The sounds of hammers, saws, and laughter blended into a warm melody. In her heart, a new dream was forming: to open her own workshop named Phoenix Woodworks. She whispered, "If wood can come back to life, so can people. I won't just restore furniture anymore. I'll restore myself." One early autumn morning, Evelyn Moore stood in front of an old building on Riverside Street, the place she planned to rent for her own workshop. The iron gate was rusted, the roof sagging, the walls covered in dust, but in her eyes it was a beginning. Harold walked beside her, frowning. "Are you sure about this? It looks like it might collapse any minute." Evelyn smiled. "That's exactly why it's cheap. I don't need something perfect, only something that can be brought back to life." 3 weeks later, a new sign appeared: Phoenix Woodworks. Everything deserves a second chance. On opening day, only a few old friends came along with those who had worked with her at Revive, and Harold, now her official partner. Evelyn looked around the empty space, sunlight streaming through cracked windows and lighting up the old wooden boards. "We start again from here," she said softly, "just like we were once left behind." The business grew faster than expected. Green Haven signed another contract, followed by 2 more furniture companies. Customers came out of curiosity, wanting to see the woman who brought old wood back to life. Evelyn hired 10 more employees, most of them older or previously unemployed. They worked diligently, treating the workshop like home. Every morning, the sound of hammers and planers echoed like the heartbeat of a new life. One day, a woman arrived. She wore a gray suit and thin-rimmed glasses. "I'm Eleanor Rodriguez from the Small Business Development Center," she introduced herself. "I've read about you, and I don't think you've realized the full potential of what you've created." Evelyn looked surprised. "I'm just a craftsman, not a businesswoman." Eleanor smiled. "No, you're creating real value. You're turning what people discard into profit, and you could help hundreds of others do the same." Evelyn listened, her heart beating faster. Eleanor spoke of opening branches, training others in restoration, even licensing the Phoenix model. Evelyn felt both fear and excitement. "I don't know anything about management," she admitted quietly. Eleanor replied, "You survived losing everything. That's all the training you need." A few days later, Evelyn began learning how to be an entrepreneur, creating plans, managing costs, balancing books. Harold grumbled, "I'm used to cutting wood, not paperwork." She laughed. "If we want to protect what we've built, we have to learn how." Many nights they sat together at the table, the lamp casting light over their tired but determined faces. 3 months later, Phoenix Woodworks was featured in the news. One magazine called her the woman who turned trash into $1 million business. Evelyn only smiled. To her, the real value lay in the people in her workshop, the ones who had once believed they were useless, now earning a living with their own hands. One evening, while reviewing expansion plans, her phone rang. A rough male voice came through. "Mom, it's me, Daniel." Evelyn said nothing. "I heard you started a company. I'm proud of you." There was a long pause. "I'm having some financial trouble. Could you?" Evelyn interrupted, her voice calm. "Daniel, I don't live on pity anymore. You need to learn to stand up the way I did." On the other end, his voice softened. "I understand. I just wanted to say you're stronger than I ever knew." The call ended. Evelyn looked out the window, smiling through her tears. At last, her son had finally seen her. The next morning, Eleanor brought a folder of loan documents. "Are you ready for the next step?" she asked. Evelyn nodded. The process would be long and exhausting, but she wasn't afraid. During the loan interview, the assessor asked, "Why do you think your business has been successful?" Evelyn answered, "Because I know what it feels like to be seen as worthless. I don't want anyone else to feel that way." The loan was approved. Phoenix Woodworks opened a new facility 3 times larger than the original shop. Evelyn partnered with vocational schools, taking in young apprentices. The workshop buzzed with laughter, the sound of hammers and light glinting off the golden letters of the Phoenix sign. Late one afternoon, Harold walked over holding 2 cups of coffee. "Remember the day you came asking for a job, you had only $800 left?" Evelyn smiled. "And you, the man who almost didn't hire me, are now my partner." Harold laughed. "Life sure has a sense of humor." When the workshop doors finally closed for the night, Evelyn sat at her desk and opened her notebook. Day 240. "I have a business now, but what I treasure most is peace. From broken pieces, I've built the most complete thing in my life." She closed the book and looked out at the sunset glowing over the new sign. The red light reflected on the word Phoenix like a burning flame. Evelyn whispered, "At last I've learned to fly." That winter, Phoenix Woodworks had become the pride of Austin. Newspapers and television kept talking about the woman who turned waste into opportunity. But for Evelyn Moore, true success shone not in headlines, but in the eyes of those working under her roof, the people who had once believed they had no worth. One afternoon, Eleanor Rodriguez brought a thick stack of papers. "Congratulations," she said. "Phoenix has been nominated for the State Community Business Award." Evelyn smiled gently. "I only helped a few people find work." Eleanor replied, "That's exactly why you deserve it." When Harold heard the news, he was as excited as a child. "If you win, I'll have to buy a new suit," Evelyn teased. "A suit's fine, but don't forget to polish the wood first." They both laughed, then returned to their daily routine. Orders kept coming, and every table and chair took shape under the hands of people once forgotten. Late that afternoon, one of the workers came running. "There's someone here asking for you, says he knows you." Outside the gate, Daniel stood there, thin, his shirt wrinkled, his face tired. 6 years ago, that same face had coldly told her to leave his house. Now he stood beneath the warm, yellow glow of the Phoenix sign. Mom Daniel said softly, "I just wanted to see where you work." Evelyn stayed silent. Harold started to approach, but she gestured for him to stop. "Come in." Daniel followed her inside his eyes, taking in the workers, the shining tables, and the sign on the wall that read, "Nothing is useless if faith remains." He murmured, "You really did it." Evelyn's voice was calm. "I only did what you once thought I couldn't." Daniel lowered his head. "I lost my job. Crystal left. I don't know how to start again." Evelyn listened, her chest tightening, but her tone stayed steady. "I once lost everything and still stood up. Now it's your turn," he whispered. "I didn't come to ask for money, I just wanted to apologize." Evelyn looked straight at him. "Apologies mean nothing unless you change. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. Be here. I'll let you work for a week on trial." The next morning, Daniel arrived in work clothes. He started by sweeping the floor, sanding, and carrying wood. No one knew he was the owner's son. Evelyn watched from afar without saying a word. Harold asked, "Who is he?" Evelyn replied, "A man learning the first lesson of life." A week passed. Daniel worked hard, sweat soaking through his shirt. He ate lunch with the team, listening as they shared their stories about finding a place at Phoenix. One elderly woman said, "Mrs. Evelyn told us we weren't broken. We just needed someone to believe in us. Now I really do believe it." Daniel stayed quiet, his eyes glistening. At the end of the week, Evelyn called her son into her office. "You did well," she said, "but I don't care about your skills." "What did you learn?" Daniel answered softly. "That money isn't everything. Real value is in creating something with your own hands." Evelyn nodded. "If you understand that you've already come halfway." On Monday morning, Daniel arrived early. He found his mother hanging a freshly painted sign, "It's never too late to start again." He stood there for a long time before saying, "Mom, I want to stay. As a worker, no title, I just want to work." Evelyn nodded gently. "All right, but here, you're not my son. You're part of Phoenix." In the months that followed, Daniel became one of the best craftsmen in the workshop. He learned how to repair, assemble, and later taught the newcomers. No one knew he had once abandoned his mother. They only saw the respect he showed her, the woman who called everything by one word, opportunity. One afternoon, Harold came to Evelyn's side. "I've never seen anyone change that fast," he said. Evelyn watched her son polishing wood and smiled. When people hit rock bottom, that's when they finally learn how to stand. That night, she opened her notebook and wrote, "Day 300. My son has returned no longer the boy I once raised, but a man who knows how to begin again. The miracle isn't in the wood, it's in the heart that's been awakened." Evelyn closed the notebook and looked out the window where the light reflected off the Phoenix sign. A deep peace rose within her, the kind she thought she'd lost forever over the past 6 years. The following spring, Phoenix Woodworks entered its 3rd year. The entire workshop had doubled in size with a new sign that read, "Turning the discarded into something worth remembering." Evelyn Moore walked among rows of polished tables and chairs, her heart swelling with quiet pride. Harold followed behind, holding a steaming cup of coffee. "I told you, you really don't know how to stop," he said. Evelyn smiled. "I didn't climb this mountain to stop halfway." A young reporter from a business magazine came to interview her. "Mrs. Evelyn," she asked, "if you could say one thing to those who've failed, what would it be?" Evelyn thought for a moment before replying, "That value never disappears. It just needs to be seen from a different angle." The quote appeared on the front page the next day, and customer visits doubled overnight. That afternoon, Eleanor Rodriguez arrived at the workshop with a new partnership proposal from a major furniture chain. "If we sign this, Phoenix will expand to 12 states, she said. Harold's mouth dropped open. From one little shop to the whole country, Evelyn looked at the thick contract and shook her head gently. I'll sign, but I won't forget why we started to give work to those left behind. I won't let Phoenix turn into a soulless factory line. Eleanor smiled. I knew you'd say that. As things settled into a steady rhythm, Daniel proposed an idea to organize a Second Life Day, where people could bring broken furniture to be restored for free. Evelyn immediately agreed. People need to see that the old can still be beautiful. The news spread quickly. On the day of the event, dozens of families arrived carrying chairs, tables, picture frames, even old music boxes. Daniel led the younger workers while Evelyn helped an elderly woman repair her late husband's old cabinet. When the door finally closed and the wood gleamed, the woman burst into tears. Thank you, dear. It feels alive again. Evelyn held her hand and smiled. Sometimes all it takes is for someone to believe. The event made headlines, and Phoenix became more than a business. It became a symbol of resilience. But amid the wave of success came unexpected news. Daniel's old house had been repossessed by the bank. Evelyn received the call, stayed silent for a few seconds, then said, You and the kids can stay in the side warehouse at Phoenix, just for now until you get back on your feet. Daniel's voice trembled. Mom, I don't deserve it, Evelyn replied. Then let your effort to be a good man prove that you do. From that day on, Daniel worked harder than anyone else. He arrived before dawn and left late at night. His 2 children, Liam and Hannah, sometimes came by to help wipe down the furniture, their laughter filling the space. Watching them, Evelyn felt warmth bloom in her chest. After all these years, the sound of family laughter had returned, not in a grand house, but in the scent of pine resin and varnish. One morning, Eleanor arrived with exciting news. You've been invited to speak at the National Women's Leadership Conference. Evelyn blinked in surprise. Me, I'm just an old carpenter. Eleanor laughed. An old carpenter who created hundreds of jobs and revived an entire community. They need to hear your story. The speech took place in Dallas in a hall filled with over 1,000 people. When Evelyn stepped onto the stage, she carried no notes, only her heart. I was once thrown out of my home with just 2 suitcases, she began. I once lived in a cheap motel thinking my life was over. But sometimes the lowest point is where life begins. I've learned that nothing is truly worthless, only unseen. The audience rose in a standing ovation. Tears fell, but they were tears of triumph. That night, back at her hotel, Evelyn called Harold. You heard that, didn't you? They want me to join the National Advisory Board. Harold laughed loudly. I told you you never stop. Just don't forget about our workshop, Evelyn replied warmly. Never. Phoenix is my home. It's where I found myself again. A few days later, back in Austin, she saw Daniel instructing a group of young workers on a new order. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating his face, not the proud, careless man he once was, but a skilled, humble craftsman. Evelyn stood silently watching. That night, she opened her notebook and wrote, Day 400. I've flown farther than I ever dreamed, but what makes me most proud isn't the money or the fame, it's seeing my son become a good man. She closed the notebook and sat quietly in her small office, listening to the rhythmic sounds of hammers echoing from the main workshop. Outside, the sign of Phoenix Woodworks glowed brightly against the night. Evelyn whispered softly, I was saved not by miracles, but by work, by faith, and by kindness. That summer, Phoenix Woodworks entered a true season of growth. Contracts from California, Oregon, and Florida poured in one after another. The second workshop opened bearing the same golden sign Evelyn Moore had written by hand, Second Life for Everything and Everyone. That slogan spoke not only of wood, but of the philosophy she had forged through years of rejection. One morning, Eleanor Rodriguez arrived at the workshop, her face glowing. "Good news, Evelyn," she said. "Phoenix has been selected among the top 10 companies invited to partner with HomeMart, the largest furniture chain in the South." Harold nearly dropped his coffee. "Us. They only work with multi-million-dollar corporations." Evelyn simply smiled. Maybe they're starting to believe in simple things too. That afternoon, the HomeMart delegation visited. The regional director, Mr. Marcus, shook Evelyn's hand with a curious expression. "Mrs. Moore, I've heard you turn discarded wood into the best-selling furniture in the state. We'd like to form a long-term partnership." Evelyn replied calmly, "I only have one condition. My workers must be treated with respect. No mass production lines, no undercutting. Phoenix was built by people, not just by wood." Marcus paused, then nodded. "We need people like you." The signing ceremony took place in the main workshop, sunlight streaming through old glass windows and landing on the mahogany table before them. When the pen touched paper, applause erupted. Harold laughed until tears welled up. "You see, I told you you didn't just restore furniture, you restored your whole life." Evelyn smiled. "We restored it together, Harold." That night she returned home late. In her small office, the warm desk lamp shone over stacks of new plans. Daniel walked in carrying 2 cups of coffee. "I've never seen you take a single day off," he said. "Working reminds me I'm still young," Evelyn replied, her eyes still on her notebook. Daniel sat down, his voice quiet. "I still remember the day you left the house. I thought you'd never forgive me. But looking at you now, I feel ashamed and proud at the same time." Evelyn put down her pen and looked at her son. "Forgiveness isn't given because you deserve it. It's given because I deserve peace." A week later, Eleanor invited Evelyn to the Women Who Build Awards ceremony. When Evelyn's name was called, the entire hall rose to their feet in applause. She stepped onto the stage, the lights illuminating her wrinkled yet confident face. "I was once called a burden," she said. "But that burden is what taught me strength. To those who've been abandoned, I want to say this: you're not broken, you just haven't been seen yet." The room fell silent, then erupted into thunderous applause. That evening, she returned to the workshop late. The lights were still on. Daniel and a few workers were finishing up. "You should rest, Mom," he said. Evelyn smiled. "When Phoenix can run on its own, I'll rest." He shook his head. "I don't think you'll ever stop." She laughed softly. "Maybe not. As long as I can breathe, I want to keep making something better." A few days later, the press ran a feature about her titled, "Evelyn Moore, the Woman Who Turned Failure into a Legacy." But for Evelyn, joy was much simpler. It came one morning when she arrived at the workshop and saw her grandson, Liam, repainting the old sign. "Grandma," he said, "can I add one more line? For Grandma, who taught us to never give up." Evelyn stood still, tears rolling down her cheeks, then nodded gently. "Write it, my boy." That afternoon, as the sunlight spilled gold across the tin roof, Harold walked into the office and handed her an envelope. From Eleanor, new contract from Canada. Evelyn opened it and laughed softly. "Remember, when I started, I only had $800 and one old suitcase." Harold grinned. "I remember. Now you have 2 workshops, 50 employees, and a story that makes people think." Evelyn looked through the glass window, seeing Daniel teaching Liam how to cut wood. The sunlight fell across their faces, a living image of what she had once dreamed of, 3 generations rebuilding what was once broken. That night, she sat in her office and opened her worn notebook, Day 500. "I was once forgotten, and now I teach others to believe they can begin again. Money is a reward, but the true legacy is faith. If anyone asks for the secret, I'll say start even with trembling hands and a heart full of cracks. She closed the notebook and turned off the lamp. Outside, the Phoenix Woodwork sign glowed brightly, reflecting against the night sky like wings spread wide. Evelyn whispered softly, I was once thrown out of someone else's life only to find my own. That October, Austin slipped into a gentle autumn. The maple tree outside the Phoenix workshop gate had begun to turn a fiery shade of red-orange, glowing like a flame that would never die. Evelyn Moore stood by her office window watching dozens of workers laboring under the soft sunlight, her heart overflowing with gratitude. Every hammer strike, every scrape of wood sounded like a heartbeat, reminding her that life was always worth beginning again. That morning, Harold walked in, holding a newspaper. You're on the front page again, he said. Evelyn smiled faintly. On the cover was her photograph standing in the workshop with a piece of wood in her hands. Beneath the headline, The Woman Who Turned Pain into a National Treasure. Harold chuckled. They should call you the Queen of Reborn Wood. Evelyn smiled. I'm just someone who learned how to love herself again. But in the midst of all that success, an unexpected challenge arrived. That morning, Eleanor Rodriguez drove up to the workshop with a serious look on her face. Evelyn, we need to talk, she said. They sat inside the small office, the door closed tight. A big company just registered a trademark called Phoenix Revival. They've copied your entire model. If we don't act quickly, you could lose the rights to your name. Evelyn frowned. Copying an idea is easy, but do they understand its value? Eleanor replied. It's not about ideas, it's about legality. If they win, you could lose the entire brand. The news spread quickly among the team. Harold was furious. We can't let them steal your work. Evelyn calmed him. I'm not afraid of losing the name. I'm afraid of losing the soul of Phoenix. If we protect that spirit, no one can take it from us. Still, she agreed to let Eleanor prepare the documents to defend their trademark rights. That evening, Evelyn came home late. Daniel greeted her with worry written all over his face. I saw the news, Mom. Are you okay? Evelyn smiled. I am. You know, the day you threw me out, I thought I'd lost everything. Turns out I was just being forced to start over. Daniel stayed silent, his eyes filled with pride. You've always been so strong. Evelyn replied softly. No, I've just learned to be more patient than the pain. A week later, the lawsuit was filed. The media buzzed again, this time not for her success, but for what they called a battle of brands between two generations of entrepreneurs. When reporters asked for her thoughts, Evelyn simply said, if they think trust can be bought with money, they've forgotten that trust must be built, not trademarked. Her words spread across social media, and soon the people of Austin rallied behind her. Hundreds of customers sent letters of support. One elderly woman who had once received a restored table from Evelyn for free wrote, no one can own a heart like Mrs. Moore's. She doesn't sell furniture, she gives hope. On the day of the hearing, Evelyn appeared in a light brown suit, simple yet steady. Across from her sat a team of young lawyers representing the rival company. They presented charts and strategies, but when it was Evelyn's turn, she brought only one item, the old oak table, the very first piece she had restored at Motel 12. I have no degrees, no credentials, she said, her voice clear. But I have these hands. They saved me. Phoenix isn't a name, it's the story of people who were trusted again. The courtroom fell silent. 2 weeks later, the verdict came Phoenix Woodworks would retain full rights to its name and motto. The press called it the victory of faith. Eleanor hugged Evelyn with tears in her eyes, and Harold patted her shoulder. I knew it, he said. No one can beat a person who lives by their principles. After the lawsuit, Phoenix's reputation soared even higher. International orders poured in, but Evelyn chose carefully. "We don't need to be bigger," she said. "We just need to be better." Daniel nodded. "Like you always taught me, not everything that shines is worth keeping." One night after the workshop lights went out, Evelyn stayed behind alone. Moonlight streamed through the window, falling on the old wooden table she had kept all these years. She placed her hand on its surface and whispered, "Once they called me a burden. Now I understand a burden is only a challenge to prove you can carry the world." She opened her notebook and wrote, "Day 600. Today I didn't defeat anyone. I only kept the truest part of myself. Phoenix isn't just a business, it's proof that when people are believed in, they can rise from their own ashes." Evelyn closed the notebook and stood up. Outside, the autumn wind gently stirred the flag at the workshop gate. The Phoenix Woodwork sign glowed brilliantly against the night sky, blazing like a flame that had weathered every storm and refused to go out. Winter returned, bringing with it the soft chill of Austin and the glow of Christmas lights across the streets. Inside the Phoenix Woodworks workshop, the sound of hammers and saws mixed with laughter and conversation. Evelyn Moore walked along the rows of workbenches, stopping beside a round table being polished. Her grandson, Liam, looked up and said, "Grandma, I finished it." "Look," Evelyn smiled warmly. "Perfect. You've brought it back to life." The boy grinned proudly. "Just like you, right?" She gently brushed his hair. "No, sweetheart. I just learned how not to give up." Across the room, Daniel was guiding a group of young apprentices. His voice carried with confidence. "Every piece of wood has a story. If you're patient enough, it'll tell you what it needs." Evelyn paused, watching her son, her heart swelling with pride. The man who had once cast her out had become someone who now taught others how to believe in themselves. At noon, Harold arrived with lunch talking as he ate. "Eleanor said the State Business Council wants you to advise their new program, Rebuild Lives, to help train unemployed workers. What do you think?" Evelyn sipped her tea thoughtfully. "If I accept, Phoenix has to be able to run on its own. I can't leave unless it's steady." Harold laughed. "Phoenix is as solid as oak now." That afternoon, Eleanor arrived. "Evelyn, they want Phoenix to be the model for the program. It'll be launched in 12 cities. Evelyn was taken aback. "That means I'd have to leave Austin." Eleanor nodded. "Only for a few months. But you'd be helping thousands of people." Evelyn looked around the workshop at the old wood now transformed into masterpieces. "I learned how to rebuild my life here," she said softly. "Maybe it's time to help others do the same." That evening, during a staff meeting, Evelyn announced her plan to step away for a few months. The room fell silent. Harold sighed. "Without you, it'll feel empty." Daniel stepped forward. "Mom, you taught me that if something is strong enough, it can stand on its own. Phoenix is strong now. Go, Mom." Evelyn looked at her son, her smile trembling. "You're right. It's my turn to trust others again." 2 weeks later, Evelyn left Austin. As the bus pulled away, she looked out the window, watching the Phoenix sign grow smaller in the distance. Her heart ached, yet it felt lighter. It wasn't a goodbye. It was the start of another journey of faith. The Rebuild Lives program began in Dallas, then expanded to Oklahoma and Kansas. Evelyn traveled from city to city, teaching the unemployed how to work with wood, how to turn what seemed worthless into something valuable. She told her own story from being rejected to standing tall again. In every place she went, eyes that once held doubt began to shine when she said, "I'm not here to teach you a trade. I'm here to remind you that you still matter." One evening after her final class, a young woman approached her. "Mrs. Moore, I used to think I was useless, but because of you, I found the courage to start over." Evelyn took her hands and said, Don't thank me. Thank your own hands. They just did something extraordinary. 3 months later, when Evelyn returned to Austin, Phoenix had changed. The workshop was larger with a new display area. Daniel greeted her with a tight hug. I took care of everything. The new Home Mart contract is signed. Harold grinned. Your son here is your mirror image now. Evelyn looked around, her eyes glistening. Phoenix hadn't just survived without her, it had grown stronger. That night, they held a small celebration inside the workshop. Soft music played as the scent of wood paint and baked goods filled the air. Eleanor raised her glass. Evelyn, you didn't just rebuild your life, you rebuilt a community. Evelyn smiled. I only did what anyone can do if they dare to believe they're not finished yet. After the party, Evelyn stepped outside into the cool night air. Daniel followed, draping a coat over her shoulders. Mom, he said quietly, I used to think you were weak. Now I know you were the fire that kept me warm. Evelyn smiled gently. Son, I'm not stronger than anyone else. I just refuse to let fear kill my faith. She gazed out at the distance where the Phoenix Woodwork sign glowed against the dark sky. All the years of pain, the tears, the struggle they had become, that very light. Evelyn took a deep breath and whispered, Day 680. I've gone further than I ever dreamed. But this journey isn't over yet, because there are still so many people who don't believe they can come back to life. She closed her notebook and lifted her head. Above her, the night sky was filled with stars, wrapping the 70-year-old woman in the gentle light of faith, the kind of flame no storm could ever extinguish. That April warm winds returned to Austin. The maple trees outside the Phoenix Woodworks gate were covered in fresh green buds. Evelyn Moore stood on the second-floor balcony looking down at the bustling courtyard below. Workers moved with focus and joy, the sound of planers blending with laughter. Phoenix now had more than 100 employees, 3 workshops, and dozens of partners across the United States. But what made Evelyn most proud was the large sign hanging in the main hall. We don't fix things, we heal people. That morning, Eleanor Rodriguez arrived with 2 special guests representatives from the Federal Department of Labor. Mrs. Moore, they said Phoenix Woodworks has been chosen as a national model for workforce retraining programs. Evelyn was stunned. I'm just an old woman who works with wood. Eleanor smiled. You're living proof that it's never too late to change. They signed the partnership agreement right there in the workshop. Local television crews filmed the event, and Daniel, representing Phoenix, gave a speech. We believe that second chances aren't only for objects, they're for people, too. Evelyn sat in the front row, tears streaming down her cheeks. He was speaking the very words she once taught him. That afternoon after the meeting, Evelyn and Harold sat on the porch, sipping tea. You see, Harold said 3 years ago you only had 1 suitcase. Now you've got an empire. Evelyn smiled softly. Not an empire, Harold. Just a promise that I'll never see anyone as useless. A few days later, Daniel came into her office looking hesitant. Mom, there's something I want to ask. What is it? She asked. The kids and I want to move in with you. Our lease is ending soon, and there's that empty apartment upstairs. Evelyn chuckled. You think I'll agree to that? Daniel looked her straight in the eye. Not because you need us, Mom. Because we need you. I want my kids to understand the real value of work and of starting over. That evening, 3 generations of the Moore family had dinner on the rooftop terrace of the workshop. The night breeze was soft and the warm light reflected on Evelyn's time-worn face. Liam told school stories while Hannah laughed brightly. Daniel sat quietly watching his mother. Mom, he said, I used to think you were weak, but maybe you were just fighting in silence. Evelyn placed her hand over his. Sometimes, silence is the strongest way to speak. Weeks later, Phoenix held its 3 years of revival ceremony. Workers, customers, and local officials all attended. Evelyn stood on stage in a simple brown suit, her warm, steady voice filling the microphone. I didn't begin this journey to make money. I began it to prove that if we don't give up what we once thought was lost, can become the seed of something miraculous. When she finished, the entire hall rose in applause. A reporter asked, "Do you have a message for those who feel like they've hit rock bottom?" Evelyn smiled gently. "When you think you've been thrown away, maybe life is simply giving you a chance to be reborn." That night, after everyone had gone home, she returned to her office. Moonlight streamed through the window, falling across the old wooden table, the very first piece she had restored back at Motel 12. She ran her hand across its smooth surface, the old scratches long gone. "We've come so far," she whispered. Daniel entered carrying 2 cups of hot tea. "Mom, I still remember the day you were thrown out of the house. I thought it was the end. But now I see sometimes an ending is just another shape of a beginning." Evelyn looked at her son, her eyes misting. "If that day hadn't happened, I'd never have found Phoenix. Thank you for pushing me off the cliff so I could learn that I could fly." Daniel smiled and took her hand. When the clock struck 10, Evelyn opened her notebook and wrote day 750. "I am old now, but my soul feels younger than ever. I hold no anger, no regrets. Life has given me everything, even pain, so I could learn to use it as fuel." She closed the notebook, turned off the lamp, and stepped out onto the balcony. Below her, the workshop was still lit, the night shift workers completing their final order. Evelyn inhaled deeply, the familiar scent of wood filling her lungs. She knew in that moment everything had come full circle, and those who once called her a burden would now have to lift their heads to look up at her. That June, the bright Texas sunlight streamed through the glass windows of the Phoenix Woodworks office. Evelyn Moore had just finished a meeting with her management team. Her eyes were slightly tired, but her gaze remained clear and steady. The older she grew, the more peaceful she became, as if every wrinkle on her face was proof of the time she refused to give up. Harold walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Good news," he said. "Phoenix has just been invited to partner with Habitat for Humanity. They want to use our woodwork to build homes for low-income families." Evelyn smiled. "I've always believed that what we create should give something back to the world." That afternoon, Eleanor Rodriguez called. "Evelyn, do you remember that old mansion on Lake Travis Hill? It's just been listed for sale." Evelyn froze for a moment. The white house with the red maple trees by the gate. "That's the one," Eleanor replied. "The previous owner moved out. I think you should see it. It's the kind of place that deserves to begin a new chapter." The next day, Evelyn drove up the hill. The winding road led to a grand 12,000-square-foot estate with white walls, red tiled roofs, and a view overlooking the shimmering blue lake. She stood before the tall iron gate, the breeze gently lifting her skirt. The sight filled her heart with awe and calm. Daniel, standing beside her, stared in disbelief. "Mom, you're really thinking of buying this place?" Evelyn looked at him, her eyes deep and steady. "Years ago, they threw me out of a house. Now I want to buy one no one ever thought I could touch." The agent led them through the tour. The living room had high ceilings, the staircase curved gracefully, and the balcony opened toward the water. For a moment, Evelyn felt as if she were dreaming. Every window and curtain seemed to whisper, "You've come back." When they reached the old library, the afternoon light fell across the dusty wooden shelves. Evelyn touched the wood gently, emotion welling in her chest. How much, she asked. The agent hesitated. $4,200,000. Evelyn paused for a brief moment. $3.8 million, cash, in 2 weeks. The man nearly dropped his folder. "Are you serious? I don't bargain when I know what I want," she said calmly. 2 days later, the deal was complete. When the keys were handed over, Daniel still couldn't believe it. "Mom, this is your house now." Evelyn held the keys lightly, her voice soft as the wind. "No, son. This is proof that no one has the right to put a price on another person's life." The news spread quickly. Headlines read, "The formerly homeless woman who bought Austin's most expensive mansion." Those who once mocked her fell silent. Even Crystal, her former daughter-in-law, sent a short message. "Congratulations." Evelyn read it and deleted it without replying. She had no desire to acknowledge the pretense of someone who once looked down on her. That evening, she stood alone in the vast living room. The crystal lights shimmered on the walls like reflections of old memories. She stepped onto the balcony and looked down at the quiet lake. From motel to mansion, from being abandoned to being respected, she whispered every journey begins with a single small step. The next morning, the family moved in. Liam ran through the halls while Hannah squealed with delight at the sight of the pool. Daniel stood still for a long moment, then turned to his mother. "I remember the day I threw you out," he said softly. "Today I realize you didn't just forgive me. You taught me how to forgive myself." Evelyn took his hand. "Then you've learned life's greatest lesson, that remorse is the first step to maturity." That afternoon, Harold and Eleanor arrived to celebrate. They raised their glasses on the porch as the golden sunlight poured down like honey. "From that old motel room to this," Eleanor said, smiling, "you've come a long way." Evelyn smiled back. "I didn't walk this path to prove anything to anyone. I walked it to find myself again." Harold added, "And you found not just yourself, but a legacy." When everyone had gone, Evelyn sat alone on the steps. The breeze from the lake carried the scent of water and wood. She opened her worn notebook and wrote carefully, "Day 800. Today I bought a house, but what I truly gained is a home, the thing I lost so many years ago. Money can build walls, but only kindness can build a home." She closed the notebook and looked up at the darkening sky. In the peaceful air, the laughter of her grandchildren echoed around her. Evelyn smiled softly. After all the years of loneliness, she was finally hearing the sound of happiness again, not in someone else's house, but in the home she had built for herself. Late in the afternoon, the red glow of sunset spread across Lake Travis, reflecting off the glass windows of Evelyn Moore's new home. She sat on the balcony, a cup of hot tea warming her hands. In the garden below, Daniel was mending the fence, while her grandchildren, Liam and Hannah, chased each other across the grass. Life had grown so peaceful that at times Evelyn wondered if the storms of the past had only been an old dream. Eleanor Rodriguez arrived holding a stack of documents. "I have good news," she said, setting them on the table. "Phoenix Woodworks has been invited to join a housing reconstruction project in Louisiana. They want you to lead it." Evelyn smiled, her voice soft and thoughtful. "I thought that at my age I'd just plant flowers and read books." Eleanor laughed. "People like you weren't born to rest." Not long after Harold showed up with a sandwich in hand. "If you're going to Louisiana, I'm coming too. No one checks quality like I do." Evelyn chuckled. "I haven't accepted yet. Daniel will run Phoenix, but I need to make sure it can stand on its own." Harold lowered his voice. "You have no idea it's been strong for a long time." That evening, the family had dinner in the garden. Warm lights glowed above them, illuminating every smiling face. Daniel raised his glass of lemonade. "I want to celebrate you, Mom, not just for this house, but for teaching us the most important lesson: no one is ever worthless." Evelyn smiled softly. "If you hadn't thrown me out years ago, I probably wouldn't be here today." The table fell silent, then burst into laughter that floated gently with the evening breeze. After dinner, Evelyn led her 2 grandchildren upstairs to her new study. The walls were paneled with oak, and at the center stood the old table from her workshop. "This is where I'll rewrite Phoenix's story," she said. Liam's eyes widened. "Are you writing a book?" Grandma Evelyn nodded. "Not exactly about wood, but about people to remind everyone that what's broken can be mended both in objects and in hearts." Late that night, moonlight streamed into the room. Evelyn sat by the window and opened her worn notebook. She wrote Day 840. "I have lived long enough to see pain turn into strength. Now I just want to pass that fire to others." She closed the book and let out a slow breath, her heart as calm as the lake outside. The next morning, Daniel came in looking hesitant. "Mom Crystal wants to see you. She said she just wants to apologize." Evelyn looked at him composed. Let her come. Everyone deserves a second chance. That afternoon, Crystal arrived, her face pale and tired, her eyes heavy. "Mrs. Moore," she began, "I know I have no right to be here, but I need to say I'm sorry." Evelyn's tone was gentle yet steady. "You owe me nothing, only your own conscience." Crystal's voice trembled. "I've lost everything, money, my home, friends. When I saw you in the news, I realized the greatest thing I lost was kindness." Evelyn was silent for a moment. "If you truly regret what you've done, then do something good. Don't apologize, act." Crystal nodded, tears rolling down her cheeks. That night, Daniel thanked his mother. "After everything, you can still be so forgiving." Evelyn placed her hand on his shoulder. "Forgiveness isn't about whether others deserve it. It's about whether we deserve peace." A few days later, Evelyn and Eleanor attended the Louisiana Project meeting. The government representative said, "We don't just want Phoenix to supply products. We want your team to train local workers to restore old homes." Evelyn replied, "I'll accept but hire those who've been forgotten by society. They'll rebuild the city and themselves." The contract was signed. That afternoon, the wind from the lake blew gently across the terrace, carrying the scent of warm wood. From the yard below, Daniel called up Mom. "Mrs. Rodriguez said she's setting up a vocational scholarship fund in your name." Evelyn smiled. "No need for that. Call it the Phoenix Trust. I just lit the flame. It's the fire that will keep burning." That evening, she opened her notebook again. Day 860. "I have forgiven the one who hurt me, and my heart feels as light as the wind. Perhaps true freedom isn't found in wealth or fame, but in the absence of hatred." She closed the notebook and set it on the old wooden table. Outside, the sound of the lake breeze whispered softly. Evelyn looked up at the night sky where the stars shone brightly. After all these years, she finally understood the greatest victory in life isn't becoming rich, but being able to smile when you look back at wounds that have healed. The following spring marked the 5th anniversary of Phoenix Woodworks. That morning, sunlight poured over Austin, reflecting off the brand new workshop where a gleaming golden sign read, "Phoenix, where every beginning has value." Evelyn Moore stood proudly at the front, her silver hair glowing under the sun, her calm smile carrying years of quiet strength. Beside her stood Eleanor Rodriguez Harold and Daniel. No one could have imagined that the woman who once had nothing but 2 suitcases and a broken heart would one day build something that changed so many lives. Eleanor hugged her tightly, her voice trembling. 5 years, Evelyn. You turned a motel room into a movement that gave people hope. Harold laughed warmly. And you made the whole woodworking industry look at itself differently. Evelyn smiled, her tone soft and grounded. "I didn't build an empire," she said. "I just helped people believe they weren't broken." After the ceremony, a young reporter approached. "Mrs. Moore, what would you say to women who've lost their way later in life?" Evelyn looked thoughtful. "Start again," she said gently. "Age doesn't limit dreams. It proves you've lived long enough to know they're worth chasing. Don't let failure define you. Let it prepare you." Her words spread quickly across social media, and Phoenix became a symbol of perseverance nationwide. That afternoon, the family returned to their home by Lake Travis. The smell of vanilla and baked sugar filled the air. Liam and Hannah had baked a cake for her 74th birthday. "Make a wish," Grandma Hannah said, her eyes sparkling. Evelyn smiled, blowing out the candles. "My wish already came true." Liam grinned proudly. "One day I want to help people like you, Grandma." She kissed his forehead. "If you stay kind, you've already succeeded." That night, when the house was quiet, Evelyn sat alone on the balcony, watching the moon's reflection ripple across the lake. The breeze carried the faint scent of pine and varnish from the workshop. She opened her worn notebook, its pages filled with the story of her life, and wrote slowly, "Day 1000. I have lived long enough to see loss turn into a gift. I was thrown out with 2 suitcases, but because of that, I found myself. If you ever feel hopeless, remember you are not being discarded. You are being sent somewhere new to begin again." Just then, her phone rang. It was Eleanor, her voice full of excitement. "Evelyn Phoenix just won the National Community Business Award." Evelyn chuckled softly. "My greatest honor," she said, "is seeing my son live with integrity." The next day, Daniel accompanied her to Washington for the ceremony. The grand hall shimmered with golden light. When her name was called, the host announced Evelyn Moore, the woman who proved that faith is stronger than fate. Evelyn stepped onto the stage, her voice trembling yet warm. "I'm not a hero," she began. "I was once called a burden until I realized that those who are cast aside often carry the greatest strength. If someone makes you feel worthless, smile. One day you'll show them what real worth means." The hall erupted in applause. Daniel's eyes filled with tears as Harold whispered, "She's done it. She's beaten life itself." On the flight home, Evelyn sat by the window, gazing at clouds drifting through the golden horizon. She thought of Motel 12, the cold nights, the faint hum of passing cars, and the promise she had made to herself never to surrender. Every scar, every hardship had become a verse in the quiet symphony of her life. Peace, she realized, wasn't found in comfort. It was found in meaning. The next morning, when she arrived at the workshop, the employees stopped what they were doing and began to clap. Daniel walked forward and hugged her tightly. "Mom Phoenix exists because of you." Evelyn smiled, shaking her head. "No, Daniel. It exists because everyone here believed that what was old could live again, including themselves." That afternoon, sunlight filtered through the high windows, illuminating the polished wood. The rhythmic tapping of hammers and laughter filled the room. Evelyn stood in the center, letting the warmth wash over her. She closed her eyes for a moment and whispered, "I've done it." That evening, she returned to her study, the room with oak-paneled walls and her first restored table in the center. She opened her notebook and wrote her final words, Day 1001. Phoenix is not just a business. It's proof that from ashes, people can still bloom. If you are hearing my story, remember, every wound knows how to turn into light. She set down her pen, her heart steady. Outside the workshop, lights glowed softly across the lake, their reflections flickering like wings unfolding in the night. Evelyn smiled, her voice gentle and full of life. "Tell your story," she whispered. "Don't be afraid to begin again." A breeze swept through the open window, carrying the scent of wood and the hum of distant laughter. Evelyn closed her notebook for the last time, her eyes peaceful. Behind her phoenix woodwork stood tall and shining, a legacy built not from wealth or fame, but from courage, kindness, and the unshakable belief that even what's broken can rise again.